Hey everybody, I'm back for another vlog. I know how much you love them, just oh so much. I guess I'm not talking about a community outrage today. I'm going to talk about something that really has been annoying me, and I don't know if it's going to be an actual rant or just me expressing my disappointment, but this has to do with the timeline consistencies that are going on between Warlords of Draenor and their history, and Azeroth, and our history. And even though I wasn't on Buttwaither's lore, if you watched that episode, Tequilas talked about this. He brought up some good points, but I wanted to give my thoughts because I was referenced a few times, so I figured, fuck it, I'll give my piece on the matter. So basically, if you guys don't know what I am talking about, I guess to start at the very beginning, at BlizzCon, when they announced Warlords of Draenor, there were a lot of questions that people who were fans of the lore like myself had. Let me move my mic. There. Basically, there were a lot of things that people began noticing, even right when the expansion was announced at BlizzCon, that didn't jive with the history of Draenor in our universe. And I don't remember the exact specifics of which things those were, but some questions got brought up at some panels. And basically, Chris Metzen did this, I know for a fact. Dave Kosak also did this at BlizzCon, I know for a fact. I think others were brought up. Other people brought this up too. They told us that the histories of Draenor and of Outland, or of Draenor and our universe, the alternate Draenor that the expansion takes place in, and our universe were the same. They told us that they were the same up until the point, if you think these are the both same histories, up until the point that Garrosh arrives at Draenor, and then splits off another timeline, basically, is what happens. We've seen that already in this universe through books like Thrall, Twilight of the Aspects, where we've found out that there are other universes where other things have changed, and people doing things can actually split off entire other not timelines, but like other universes, pocket universes, basically. There was the one in Thrall where Blackmore became the king, and then we had all the various ones referenced in War Crimes, where, you had Caligos going crazy because Jaina ended up destroying Orgrimmar, and you had one where Varian died and Anduin was already king, and you had one where Bane had killed Garrosh and was war chief himself. So there's a bunch of different timelines, but we were told at BlizzCon that our timeline and Draenor's timeline were the same until Garrosh arrived, and up until that point, they're supposed to be identical. Cut to now that the beta is out and people are actually playing it, like myself and others, and we began noticing there are a lot of differences now compared to Draenor's universe versus ours. And it's things that you can't excuse by saying, oh, well, it's because Garrosh arrived and changed things. It's things like geographical locations. Blade's Edge Mountains was a thing in Beyond the Dark Portal, the novel, or Warcraft 2, the expansion. Blade's Edge Mountains existed in the lore. And now in Draenor, in Warlords of Draenor, it's in Frostfire Ridge, and it's only a single mountain. And it's kind of like a joke thrown in there, I think, in my opinion. It's called Blade's Edge Mountain. Where before we knew that the mountains had already existed for a long time. Another difference that is like a really big difference that I'm kind of annoyed they haven't explained. Rul Khan, Ner'zhul's mate, is alive still. If you're watching my playthrough of Shadowmoon Valley, you already saw where we did her part of the quest chain. She's alive. And for those of you who don't know why that's a big deal, in our universe, which I'll cover on the Ner'zhul episode, which I have it all recorded. I just have to edit it. I fucking hate editing so much, but I have it all recorded. I'll get it out soon, I promise. But you'll hear in the Ner'zhul episode that Rul Khan in our universe was already dead by the time that these events, if you can correlate them between Warlords and ours, by the time that this is already happening, Rul Khan's already dead in our universe. And in fact, Kil'jaeden actually uses like the image of Rul Khan, or her visage, or whatever you want to call it. He uses the image of Rul Khan to trick Ner'zhul into beginning the long chain of events that happens, that ultimately culminates with, Gul'dan supplanting him and subjugating the orcs. It all begins with Kil'jaeden taking on the figure or the form of Rul Khan and tricking him because she's dead. But in Warlords, she's alive, and there's no explanation. They don't explain why she's alive. They don't explain how she's alive. They don't explain what happened with Ner'zhul. They don't explain, how did Kil'jaeden still do things if Rul Khan was alive? Did he take an image of another ancestor of the Shadow Moon Orcs and still tricked him? Or was Ner'zhul just bypassed 100% all the way and killed Jaden like right out of the gate, went to Gul'dan immediately? What happened? We don't know, and this is a big problem that is leading into what my issue is in this video is. So you have all these things conflicting with one another now. You have Warlords of Draenor basically conflicting with every other piece of lore we've had thus far about Draenor. So on Twitter, Red Shirt Guy, which you guys, if you might know, he's the guy who asked the infamous Falstad Wildhammer question 2-3 years ago at BlizzCon. He asked, he tweeted at Dave Kozak and he said, I'm reading it right here. Is Warlord of Draenor's Draenor different from our Draenor even before Garrosh shows up? There are a lot of inconsistencies in the beta. And Dave Kozak kind of jokingly says, Kairaz would caution you not to count every blade of grass. And so Red Shirt Guy again says, so the stuff like the Bleeding Hollows characterization or Rulkan being alive aren't retcons, just a different pre-Garrosh history. And Dave Kozak basically, he doesn't say yes, but his response is basically yes. He says, you'll discover other little differences as well. And when I read that, I immediately got really angry. Because, A, he doesn't count Rulkan's death or being dead or being used to trick Ner'zhul as a big deal. It's a big deal. It's a huge deal for that character. Because it establishes the whole tragic aspect of Ner'zhul. The whole point of him becoming a villain is because he gets tricked into it. He doesn't willingly just jump off the deep end and become totally evil. That doesn't happen until the very, very, very end of his storyline when he's alive as an orc still. It doesn't happen until he's about to step through step through a portal at Black Temple, where he basically just says, fuck everybody, I hate everyone, I'm out for myself. That doesn't happen until the very end. The whole point of Rulkan's death and Kill Jaden using her to trick Ner'zhul is supposed to set up his status as a tragic villain, not even a villain for most of his story, more of like an anti-hero. Until the very, very end, like I said, he's set up this way through Rulkan's death, and you know that being used to manipulate him and to trick him into thinking he's just trying to save his people, and that's been totally changed. And we don't, it's not explained why it's changed. It's not explained what happened. Like I already mentioned this whole list, why it's changed, what happened, who did Kill Jaden pose as, or did he just skip him over entirely and went to Gul'dan? But, you know, that's the whole point about Ner'zhul is part of this, but it's not the main reason I'm upset. The main reason I'm upset is now we've gone from what we thought was an established history that might have some retcons in it, and I'll explain in a second. We've gone from an established history for both universes that might have a couple retcons to now just two totally different timelines with no explanation. And now let me explain myself a little bit further. At BlizzCon, when they said, you know, don't really think about the differences between Draenor and our universe, they flat out said, up until when Garrosh arrives, both universes' histories are exactly the same. And when stuff like this happens in the lore, when really old lore is brought up again in a new way, like when I say Draenor wasn't really a thing. Draenor was in Warcraft 3's expansion, but it was already Outland at that point. Draenor as Draenor really wasn't a focus of anything since, you know, Beyond the Dark Portal, I guess, but you can count it as, you know, Warcraft 2's expansion, so many, many years ago, over 10 years ago. But now they've brought it back with Warlords of Draenor. And when you have a piece of established lore that's old, and then they bring back that lore, but they change it some, the new lore becomes what the actual lore is. The new lore retcons all of the old stuff so that there isn't a difference or criticism, or not criticism, so that there aren't like clashing things that don't work with one another. There can't be Blade's Edge Mountain and then also Blade's Edge Mountains. There can't be Dead Rulkan and also Alive Rulkan. There can't be the idea of the Dark Star, which is like this forbidden Shadow Moon Valley Orc clan. Shadow Moon Orc clan, I don't know why I said Valley. This forbidden Shadow Moon Orc clan power source that's never brought up ever in Warcraft 2, Beyond the Dark Portal. It's never brought up in the novel. It's entirely new to Warlords of Draenor. You can't have that existing and also not existing. So how we get around that so that we can like just process the lore and not just be contradicting ourselves all the time is the new lore always retcons the old lore. And that's what was happening here. You had people that were upset. I was not really happy about it. I thought if they were going to do Draenor, they should have done Draenor as they've described it already. And why they didn't, I'll explain a little bit further why I think they didn't. But if you're going to have this new Draenor, then you have to say it retcons the old stuff. Otherwise, you just get into nonsensical, just crazy alternate dimensions that don't even matter. But when you establish that they're supposed to be the same before it changes, then you can still care about it because you can say, oh, in our universe, we can see how all of this happened until they changed it. And now I'm kind of like rambling and not making sense, but my point is, when you have two conflicting sets of information, one is older and one is newer, the newer one always overwrites the older one. But with Dave Kozak's words, that's not the case anymore. There are now two completely separate, different histories of Draenor, and it's not explained why. I mean, the whole point of them bringing this up at BlizzCon is people were rightfully concerned that, you know, they're just going to be getting into some, you know, I don't really watch or read or listen to a lot of time traveling stuff, but imagine whatever favorite time traveling show or book or series that you look at, I'm sure that they address the idea of conflicting timelines in some way. And this was supposed to be Blizzard's way of not having those. You weren't supposed to be having these conflicting timelines because the new lore was retconning the old lore. There was only Blade's Edge Mountain. There wasn't Blade's Edge Mountains. The Dark Star was always a thing. Rulkan never died. Somehow, some other way, Kil'jaeden did his shenanigans and started all this shit. But now there's not. There's two different things. And I don't know what to do as a fan of the lore because you can just say, it's not as easy as just saying, well, just treat them as two separate things. Because it's not. They're not supposed to be two separate things. That's not how they advertise it. They advertise it as, we're going to go see Draenor before it exploded into Outland. We're going to see Draenor in its full glory. But this is no longer the Draenor of our history, of our universe, of this lore. This is a totally just different place. It's like having an entirely different area that just happens to share a lot of the names with our history. It's still radically different. Gorgrond was never a thing in Draenor. Now it's a huge thing in Warlords of Draenor. The Spires of Iraq was never a thing in Old Draenor. Now it's an entire zone in Warlords of Draenor. And, you know, if they would have just said, let's just retcon it and say Warlords of Draenor's Draenor is how it's always been, then you're simplifying it. You're simplifying it, but instead they're complicating it for no reason. No reason that I can even fathom. Except for the one that I'm about to bring up, which I think is why they did it. So, you have our Draenor, the new Draenor, excuse me. See, I'm even confusing myself here with this bullshit now. You have the new Draenor and the new expansion that's not out yet. And you have radically different terrains. And I think, I can't prove this, but I'm almost 100% sure the reason that they changed most of the geography of this Draenor is that they wanted varied environments in this expansion. It was almost entirely a gameplay choice. They wanted to have, you know, totally different landscapes for each zone that you're in. And the reason I think that is because they brought this point up over and over and over and over at BlizzCon. They said, look at how awesome Frostfire Ridge is, and, you know, the color scheme of the snow against the volcanic rock. And then they would say, oh, look at Shadow Moon Valley, and look how it's always night, and it has its own scheme, and you're going to leave the zone thinking, oh, that's the zone where it's always at night. Or you're going to leave Frostfire and think, oh, that's the zone that's always has winter in it. Or you're going to leave Gorgrond and think, oh, that's the zone that has the giant steam vents. So it's, in one hand, I think that's part of the reason why they changed it. But in the other hand, another reason I think is because they don't want to invalidate, at least not totally, they don't want to totally invalidate Beyond the Dark Portal and that lore, and Warcraft 2 and that lore. So basically what I'm trying to say is, I think they're trying to have it both ways. And I think it's just coming off as a garbled mess, much like this video is coming off like a garbled mess, I'm sure, because I'm getting lost in my own points. These aren't prepared remarks. I'm just kind of going off the cuff, and I was bored and I was thinking about this topic, so this video came about. So go ahead and flame the shit out of me in the comments about how nonsensical the video is. But anyway, So I think they're trying to have their cake and eat it too. They're trying to say, this is the new Draenor, and look how sparkly and new it is, and it's so awesome, and all these varied terrains, and look at all these cool things that are going on. While at the other hand, still saying, oh, by the way, the Draenor that you know in the history and the lore is still a thing now, because unlike what we said at BlizzCon, there are actual differences. But they don't explain why. They don't explain why, and it's important to know why. When you're crafting a story, you can't have gigantic, conflicting pieces of evidence, or pieces of lore, or terrain, or history, or whatever the fuck you want to call it. You can't have these two conflicting sets of things, because then people like me who really care about the story, we then begin thinking, it doesn't seem like they care about the story anymore. If they're just going to do whatever they want and then just go, it's a new universe, it doesn't even matter. We can't even be bothered to say that they're the same histories anymore. If they're going to do that, then someone who cares about the story, I'm just going to say, if it's an entirely different universe, if it's not even the same history, if the Draenors aren't even the same till Garrosh arrives, why do I care? There's no reason for me to care. And the only way they're going to pretend to make people care is to tie the end of the expansion to our universe. They're going to do that, obviously. Because otherwise, if it just takes place entirely on Draenor, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter after we stop the Iron Horde from invading and shut off the portal. If Draenor's events are just contained entirely on Draenor after that, it doesn't matter. What we do doesn't matter. And every other expansion have had things that matter to the world. Even Classic. You had Onyxia doing all of her crazy shit. The reason why Varian's not the king is because of Onyxia. You have Burning Crusade, where the portal finally opens and we can go back to Outland. And Illidan, Stormrage, one of the most iconic characters in the lore, is like fucking doing crazy shit. Wrath of the Lich King. The Lich King comes back and it has ramifications on the world. Going back to BC for a second, the Magar Orcs join the Horde, and you see them through all of the other expansions. You still see them, like, interspersed here and there between the Horde. Wrath of the Lich King comes back. Bolvar becomes the Lich King. Cataclysm, the world literally breaks. Mists of Pandaria, we have, like, this huge alliance and Horde war that has gone over the entire world, spilling into this new continent. But then you'll have Draenor, where nothing is going to matter. So, I don't understand what they're doing. It's lazy storytelling. It's just lazy storytelling. You're not convincing me that we should give a shit about Draenor. I mean, if we can see that Khadgar can just open portals back to our universe, why don't we just stop the Iron Horde, stop them from ever being able to get back to Azeroth, which, by the way, we probably should have just fucking killed Gul'dan if anyone's even remotely knows the history as that character. Why would you set him free? That's an aside. If we could just permanently shut down the portal on Draenor's side, then just have Khadgar portal us home, and we'll be done with it. There's no reason to stay. Who gives a shit that Durotan in another universe is under attack? It's fucking lazy storytelling to ham-fist the idea that Thrall needs to save his alternate universe father's self. When we see him in Thrall, Twilight of the Aspects, letting his parents die because he doesn't want to change the timelines. We said that event happens in the book. He sees his parents getting killed by Gul'dan's assassins, and he wants to save them, but then he thinks to himself and says, I can't change time. But then he stays on this Draenor for no reason and just changes time, like, immensely. The same with the Alliance and the Draenei. It's a garbled fucking mess. And I'm not going to say I called it when they first announced Warlords of Draenor, and I kind of brought this point up, but I kind of called it. They kind of allayed my fears a little bit by at least saying, the histories were the same. But now that's out the window. So it just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter anymore. Who fucking cares what happens to Draenor? Let Gul'dan rule the whole thing. Who gives a fucking shit? Let it explode. I don't even care. Let Velen go have butt sex with Durotan and let them have Orc Draenei babies. Who even gives a shit what happens to that place anymore? It's just, it's nonsense. It's nonsense. And instead of going the intelligent route of saying, look, either Draenor in this expansion is how it's always been, or, and if they want to do this other option, they've had to have decided upon it way before they made the expansion, or say, the Draenor that we described is always what Draenor was, and build the expansion like that. Don't have these two conflicting pieces of lore. these two universes that are totally different for no reason, and expect us, or at least the fans of the lore, to just buy that shit and to just be like, yeah, okay, it still matters what we do, because it doesn't. It doesn't matter. So that's, I guess, the end of this. I guess it was kind of ranty at the end, so I hope you enjoy that. If people who like my rants. So let me know what you think about this whole nonsense. Let me know if you even understood what fucking point I'm trying to make, because after I got through the woods, I don't even know what the point ultimately was. I think it was, I'm just pissed off that they unnecessarily complicated the lore for no reason. And it's not even because they had to. They didn't have to. They didn't have to do it. That's the biggest point here. They complicated it for no reason, and they didn't have to. They wanted their cake and eat it too. They wanted to say this was the new Draenor and we should care about it, and then they also wanted to say the old lore still matters. And that you can't do that. It's like it's hard for me to explain because I can't even logic it in my brain. You can't have two sets of history of the same thing. It's as simple as that, and it's stupid. It's nonsensically complicated. It's lazy storytelling, and it's stupid. Which is unfortunate, because the expansion, everything else besides it, is fucking awesome. Even Shadow Moon Valley, when you even when, and I know it's hard, especially hard, it's hard for me to do it, even when you ignore all of that stuff, Shadow Moon Valley's story is fucking fantastic. And at the point that Tequilus brought up, that's fucking brilliant. He brought up Embo Aether's lore. The micro story versus the macro story. The micro story of Shadow Moon Valley, the specific individual characters, how they interact, what their stories are, what the conclusions of it are, the villain of Ner'zhul and what he does, and the conclusion of that, Valen and what he does. It's all amazing. It's amazing. It's so good. It might be one of the best storylines in this entire game's history. Frostfire Ridge, maybe not as good, but it's still very intriguing. I haven't finished it, but I know what the ending is, and I'm still intrigued. I'm interested. But those are micro stories. Those are stories about character interaction. When you get to the macro level, it just all falls apart. It falls apart because it's nonsensical. Because you have two conflicting histories for no reason. It's not explained. And from what Dave Kozak's tweets seem to indicate, they're not going to explain it. They're going to pretend it's some kind of Where's Waldo game and say, kind of keep a lookout for the differences because there, wink wink. But I don't want to do that, Blizzard. I don't want to look out for the differences. I want consistency in the story. That's not hard. That's not a hard thing to ask for. So that's it. That's the end of the video. Let me know what you guys think about this whole topic in the comments below, and I will see you for the conclusion of Shadow Moon Valley because I have my internet back. Yeah. So I'm gonna be playing that and recording it, and hopefully it should be up. If not tomorrow, then Tuesday at the latest. So thanks for watching, everyone. I'll see you next time. Stay tuned for more Warlords of Draenor content in every variety. And yeah, thanks for watching.